also add that a lot of getting into the dirt, so into the weeds of things, which I know at times some of you may have to do. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. I'll be honest, I had an employee who was going to be here, and sort of through circumstance, he ended up with me. But the good thing is the presentation she was going to give you was mine, so that's a good thing, right? I've been in the social sector now as an executive for over 20 years. And so that in my career actually has been involved in everything from youth development, leading agencies that do youth development, all the way to directing emergency assistance for this county, for utilities, mortgages, for those who were underemployed. And today, leading an organization that's one of the leading organizations for this county's economic mobility. And one of the things that we do at the Urban League, and you'll see, is we really focus a lot on workforce development for adults, but also youth. So we believe in what we call a continuum of opportunity model. That means developing talent at a very young age and gearing towards 21st century skills. So I'll give you one example, is that we are the largest provider of nationally certified fiber technicians in the state. A lot of people don't know that. That means larger than a community college in terms of getting people into those type of fields. And I'll talk about some of the fields in a bit as I go through this. But as practitioners, many of you PMPs and in project management, one of the things that's a little different I'll talk to you about today is really that this comes from much more of a community-wide perspective when you talk about workforce development. What we're discovering more and more, and I'll go through that in a second, is that it really does take a village to raise an employee. And so in other words, that we have to develop continuums now that actually get people in pathways to career readiness, entrepreneurial development. And so nowadays you are seeing many more partners at the table than you used to. Employers at one time seemed to have the sole responsibility after people had left whatever educational institutions or whatever they came with, were really primarily responsible for a lot of an employee's development. But now what we're finding is that our workforce is shifting. We're obviously seeing our markets change. And to be honest, we have large portions of human capital that are just not prepared for that. And we haven't necessarily made the right investments along the way. So part of what I'm going to talk to you about is 21st century workforce leadership, but also this notion of developing pathways towards economic mobility. Because now, as employers, too, we have to start to think of what type of employee do we want? Do we want an employee who can just do the job, or do we want employees that also can help support the market? So think back, for example, to someone like Ford, right? When we first started paying that $5 wage early in the 20th century, which was higher for its time, his primary thought was, I needed people who could buy my cars. I had to start with my employees. And so our notion is, too, that we have to develop a workforce that also can help our economy, help boost it even more. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that if I can get this to work here. If not, if you show me how to manually do it, we'll get it.
And I got you, Doctor.
Get it. Thank you.
Why is it not working for me?
I don't know. see if it might be working for me now. Okay, so who are we? First, the National Urban League is an organization that started in 1910, and it started as a result of the Great Migration. Many, at the time, African Americans and others, migrating from the South to the North, particularly as industry started to develop. And one of the two focus areas of the National Urban League at that time in 1910 was employment and housing. And so they saw those two as being very important. And to tell you the truth, in this market today, those two things are still very important. Especially if you look around you here in Charlotte now, and the development that you see happening in this uptown area, right? It's close to 30+% of people who are actually traveling in to work. What's more important, though, is that as you start to see the industries around you that are developing, and particularly those that are in the hotel industry, hospitality, and others, those employees actually being pushed further and further out to the outer rings. So that's actually an issue that employers have to start to think about more and more as people are trying to make it into work with, obviously, our cost of living, particularly in housing, going up. And I'm going to give you an example because we're also thinking about affordable housing, and you hear that term used a lot. The reality is our police officers, our teachers, others need affordable housing. Many of our baseline workers need affordable housing. Back in 2007, we were about 17,000 units short of affordable housing for those in our workforce. Today, that is now at 33,000, right here in Charlotte. And one of the reasons I also wanted to focus on this topic is because we also, many of you may have heard, the Chetty study out of Harvard that ranked us lowest in economic mobility for people out of poverty. What that means is that the chances of you moving up the ladder if you are in poverty here in Charlotte, you are less likely to do that compared to other 49 top cities in this country. So we are the tale of two cities. We also rank, obviously, one of the best places for high-salaried individuals to live. So the developments you see is real, but obviously there are some who are not benefiting from that. And what's interesting is that the higher percentage of those who are not are people who have lived here, all their lives or for a much longer period of time than most of us newcomers who have come within the last 10, 15 years. So the local urban league here, been here since 1978. We were founded by community leaders and a study between Johnson C. Smith University and UNC Charlotte to deal with disparities in employment. And so one of the recommendations that came out of that study was to bring an urban league affiliate here to start to deal with those workforce issues. Our vision to be the premier change agent, inspiring the community to attain social, economic, and educational inclusion in a global economy. So what we're really here to do is to take all forms of human capital, particularly those in the low to moderate income space, and try to find them an entry point into the global economy. Mission to empower the community to attain financial stability and social justice in a global economy through three means: education, training, and placement. So all of our services float around those three things: education, training, and placement. Core values, I won't go through them all, but just some that are very important to us. We believe education, training, and placement services are a pathway to financial stability and dignity. 2, we do not support marginalizing people and communities by referring to them as at risk, but believe deeply in their potential as human capital and refer to the people we serve as at opportunity. That notion of at opportunity and looking at communities, workforce, entrepreneurs as being at opportunity actually is a driver on how we approach it, which I think is key. Because if you think about it, when you invest in something, you generally try to stay away from those things you consider risk, but you invest in opportunity. And so how we begin to think about human capital more and more as opportunities for us will become very important. You can see the others, inclusive and evidence-based approaches. So a lot of what we do in terms of workforce development is based on data and some forms of evidence. Get to that in a little bit. And obviously we support diversity, empathy, honesty, and shared knowledge in our sector. Operating principles, won't go through all of those, but we think that the strengths and challenges of our customer, we think about those, so we require a deep understanding of the potential of each customer through engagement. And again, we want to be evidence-based, be leaders in system change. We'll talk a little bit about that. Be great within capacity. So we realize that a lot of what we do, and talking about collaboration, sometimes an overused term, but still very necessary, is that we believe deeply that we should know our capacity and really know the capacity of our partners to accomplish what we're trying to do. So for example, I'm on the board of Charlotte Works, the Workforce Development Board here in Charlotte. And so we actually do a lot of collaboration with that organization, as well as the Charlotte Regional Partnership, Charlotte Chamber, and others, when we're looking at the types of jobs that are coming down the pipe into this area. And so we're also actively involved with CPCC and others to ensure that we're trying to prepare people for those types of jobs. So let me give you a quick example. How many of you have heard of Google Fiber, right? All of the hoopla coming to town. Well, when we looked at the types of industry coming to Charlotte, we launched our National Fiber Certification Initiative back in 2008 to start to build a pipeline before those entities even came. So it's about being able to forecast, look further down the trough, and begin to develop the talent. So I only point this out to you. This is a book which an editor of Faces of Reality, the State of Ethnic Charlotte, and it looks at Mecklenburg and 8 surrounding counties, including in South Carolina, in terms of disparities in economics, education, health, as well as civic engagement. So these things that actually affect the ability of our communities in this region to have a thriving workforce. So something I want to point out to you that came out of that study, and it just gives you a brief example of how workforce development and other factors affect the ability of people to earn a living, but also, more important, to become good employees. So if you look at the median income for a white family here in Mecklenburg, you'll see that the blue, representing 2013, they're at $70,382. That's slightly, only up a slight tick from 2009. If you look at the African American family, you'll see actually a dip of close to $3,000, and they're at 37. Latinos, slight dip down to 36, and Asian community up to about 75. Now, what do you think accounts for that? What accounts for Asians actually doing better in median income than the rest of the population? IT, tech jobs, those play a big factor. There's another one, though, that most people don't think of. They're entrepreneurs, too. A large amount of entrepreneurs. Matter of fact, I live in Belmont, right in Gaston County. And in Gaston County, that median income for Asians was up above 100,000. I said, what is that? Because it's such that dramatic increase, and I found there, yes, IT, but many people are entrepreneurs. Cleaners, other types of businesses that They weren't always IT, but were really basic services that communities need every day. Right?
You mentioned that this was for Mecklenburg County specifically.
Yes.
Between the years of 2009 and 2010, was there any shift in the ratio across these groups at the same time?
There is. So you'll see that for the most part, most of them stayed flat. But there is something interesting, particularly with African Americans. When you had the market crash, right? I call it the market crash, we call it recession, whatever you want to call it. You had in this county, for example, a 32% slippage of African Americans out of middle class. Largest group that experienced that slippage. So we talk a lot about economic mobility, but there's also this slippage factor that we have never recovered from. You also saw this slippage happen in white families and others, but it just affected some groups a lot more. And so that's one of those trends that you saw happen very rapidly in that period. Systems. So one of the things that the Urban League does along with partner agencies is that we actually also think more in terms of system change. So when you're thinking about economic mobility, workforce development, and how it fits, we actually look at mobility as part of a larger ecosystem. So in one portion you have large systems that affect people all the way down to an individual level. But there's rare connectivity here. So for example, transportation, right? Doesn't always have conversations with the housing sector, right? Or the housing sector, not always in conversation with the workforce sector. And so one of the things we're striving to do when we talk about systems change is to get these sectors, through people like you and others, to start having more conversations as they have economic development. So I'll give you an example. About 98% of the new rail system that will now be going up west on trade through Beatty's Ford is already paid for, right? So it's going to happen. Now the question becomes, how do current residents, right, get engaged, or how do we engage them in the actual work of developing that infrastructure? Just as important, what percentage of those people actually will remain? As we know that gentrification and other things do occur when you have that type of development. So then housing, other entities must have some conversations that are integrated conversations in order to deal with that issue. Because those people who are there are working somewhere. So the displacement also affects their ability not just to work, but also the employer's ability to retain talent. So those are the type of conversations that we have to have. So when you think about these systems, you have your ecosystems, you have sector systems like those I just mentioned. There are networks, institutions, groups. So for example, I'm part of what they call the Charlotte Mecklenburg Workforce Development Partners, which is a group of 12 workforce agencies that include ourselves, a Goodwill, a Charlotte Works, Mecklenburg County, right? And our job is to come up with unique ways, CPCC and others, to partner on ensuring that we have not only a ready workforce, but actually that we're in communication with employers about the opportunities that are there within the people we serve. Neighborhoods and families, where you see even stronger connectivity. So a lot of times we have to think here, but make sure we're communicating here. Because this is where the stronger, even stronger connectivity is. Right? Most of us today, you have neighbors, you have family. That's where your strongest connectivity is. So that's where we need to be. And the reason I say is, out of all our workforce participants, we placed over 1,400 people in jobs last year. over 50% of those are referred by word of mouth by other customers. The other 50% by partner agencies, but you get the point where the connectivity actually occurs. This just briefly gives you an idea that when we talk about systems and mobility and where workforce fits, we believe in what we call these continuums. So in education, you have to be connected to workforce development, economic development, entrepreneurship, your supplier small business diversity, financial literacy, health and human service, and advocacy and public policy. So we really believe that all of these players have to be engaged in order to develop a workforce. So let's talk about some trends that we're starting to see in workforce development. Number one, ownership of training and development. You're starting to see companies get even more engaged in that. However, if I just use the example of manufacturing, only 50% of manufacturing agencies even have a plan on how they're going to recruit and retain new talent in this changing environment, particularly in advanced manufacturing. That means another 50% don't really have a plan. So think about that. As you're managing projects and other things, think about what effect that can have, right, when you're talking about talent. 2, strengthening partnerships with local academic institutions in the social sector. So now you are starting to see much more collaboration occurring between the social sector and academic institutions to create this workforce pool. Why? Because a CPCC, for example, is a great institution, one of the top community colleges in this country, 70,000 plus students. But what they found is that a lot of the social sector agencies have already gone and gained the trust of people. So some of their services, as we do now, we move them into these neighborhoods through these social sector agencies. So, for example, at the Urban League facility, a person can literally earn credits at CPCC through some of the programming that we provide in collaboration together. That's a way to get them into the system and into the college system, yet meeting them where they are as we move them up a pathway. Sector and individual pathway models. So you see more workforce development boards, especially with their partnerships, developing a lot more robust pathway models. So they're doing it by sector. So in health, literally if you were to go on to, for example, the Charlotte Works site, you would see things like the health industry and literally a breakdown of the various types of jobs, what it takes to get in them, to inform individuals how to create a career pathway model within industries. You see the same thing in advanced manufacturing and others. A lot of attention, we talk a lot about diversity, but we're heading much more to these notions of inclusion, particularly in decision making, and of course, economic mobility. A lot of what you hear, even on the political trail today, the middle class, what are we going to do about these people who are working now part-time, as full-time? All these conversations really are about economic mobility, because overall we have seen, right, wages, in many ways, the earnings of average American families going down, especially when you compare it to the cost of living. I'll put here question mark equity. Urban League inclusion has to lead to equity for us. Not everybody's on that page. So I'll put the question mark there. Not everybody's about equity. And I get it. And the other is that we see much more attention being paid to continuums to increase employee viability. So now employers, when they come to agencies like ours or even to our board at Charlotte Works, what we notice is that more and more of them are telling us that yes, we need people with the hard skills, but they're also lacking a lot of the soft skills. So as you're managing projects, you're managing people, you're not always getting people who have the soft skills to interact in collaborative environments. Even those who've gone to college, care how many degrees you have. Doesn't matter. If that is not a skill set that's taught, you simply don't have it. And so a lot of times, even what you're doing, you may not always see it, but a lack of soft skills actually causes a lot of issues when it comes to getting things done. And we're seeing it more and more. I'll give you, I remember when I first got out of grad school, and my younger brother, who had a degree from University of Maryland, Go Terps, in graphic arts, and so he had, for the first time, to pay his rent. He hadn't quite opened his bank account yet, so he had to go and get, right, a certified, not even cashier. What do you call when you go to the post office?
Money order.
Money order. I haven't had to do that in so long. So a money order. He didn't know how to do it. He called me and said, "Yeah, so where did I go to get a money order? How do I balance a checkbook? How do I never had to do any of these things. I got my first job. They're talking about they want us to work as a team on this project, but where I've been, I had to do work by myself. I'm not working on a team. What is that about? So it's those types of things that we're noticing more and more that we have to deal with.
Can I ask a
Yes.
about that? So when we talk about economic mobility, I think the general understanding is making sure that there are opportunities for people to move up, right?
That's correct.
Is there any broader implication or consideration for the easier it is you make it to move, then that means it's not always one direction?
So, good
Does that make
question.
sense?
I got exactly where it is. So this is the deal with mobility. When we talk about economic mobility, first of all, we approach it from the standpoint that it is a benefit to society, but also a benefit, right, to employers. Because what we're actually seeing more and more, and you've seen this actually with consumer confidence, right? The number of people who save now, fears about the future, is that when you don't have pathways people can follow, then you begin to affect the actual consumers who support you. And what we've seen is that the United States has had the largest, fastest, most rapid growth in billionaires. But obviously a shrinking middle class. Now this is not to talk about some form of class warfare. But there's a reality that trickle-down economics are not necessarily always how we've seen economic growth. It's sort of been tension between both ends, right, that creates some growth. And what we're seeing now is that as it becomes more difficult for people to be able to save, buy, etc., and this is what's interesting about it, is that we're not talking about all segments, but we're talking about divisions of segments that this is occurring with. But like anyone, you don't want to leave, right, anything valuable on the table that can be used. So think about the number of people that we still have to import for talent. But we have a lot of wasted human capital that we could still use, that put strains on some of our social service systems and others. It still ends up with a cost. So I'll give you another example. And this is one that's touchy for some folks, but it's in our social justice system. We are only one of 2 states that charges teenagers at 16 and 17 as adults automatically, no matter what the infraction. Right? So automatic. There's just us in New York, and New York is soon to probably be, it looks like, off of that. So it'll be just us. The governor had hired consultants who are experts in this area, and the one thing they came up with is that the cost savings to employers as well as to the state would greatly increase if we actually abandoned that policy. However, it would be short-term cost to us in the beginning. Why? Because it is more expensive, right, to prosecute juveniles, because you also have to provide education opportunities and other things. But if you're 16, 17, I guess you want to do that, right? As opposed to putting in an adult system where those things are not always required. But the overall cost to us is a lot higher long term. So do we want that human capital to be used that way, or do we want to find other ways to use it? That becomes the question. And I can tell you right now, due to short-term, what I call short-term thinking, even though those recommendations were made, we haven't moved. Because we're still thinking about the short-term costs versus long-term costs, which most companies that thrive and grow think much longer term. So let me just talk to you briefly, and I want to race through some of this so we can get to any questions or thoughts you may have. One of the things that we're doing a lot in the workforce sector is really going to demand-based and need-assessed approaches. So that means, really simple, what jobs are available in the current and future market, what do employees want from an employee, what resources are available to meet demand, what partnerships, relationships can be formed to accomplish it. On the need-assessed side, how do we equip people with soft and hard skills that meet demand, what barriers exist, and how do we deal with them? What partners exist to meet barriers, and how do we accomplish placement, and most important, retention? So that's where a lot of times the soft skills come into play, is in the retention side. Because that's where we've seen, particularly in some of the entry-level roles, where we've seen the most problem. We've also seen that, obviously, as you get into younger generations. Think about this, that you have now 5 generations, for the first time in our history, 5 generations in the workplace all at one time, with your 2 largest on your opposite ends. That's never been before. This is the first time that you had all 5 in at the same time. Now, a lot of things contribute to that. One is we're living longer. 2, some people can't retire like they wanted to. Right, so they're still there. And then you also have millennials who also are very transient. Right? And I think that's driven by a couple of things. One, let's face it, employers don't always, have the same loyalties to employees, and vice versa. This is what's interesting. Being in the social sector, you begin to learn that some people don't understand that we are a business. So the social sector, including education, accounts for about 10% of our economy. So it's nothing to sneeze at anymore. And so here often, well, you need to run like a business. So we do. So whenever we have cuts, for example, people get upset. They say, oh my goodness, did you hear what happened over there? Did you hear what happened over at, the Gantt Center, wherever it is, or at Discovery Place? And those same people, who sometimes many of them on board, are reading the paper. You just let go of 1,500 people. Right? It's all part of business. But I say that because we need to really look at how we are going to retain talent. Because that plays a large role in the ability of an organization to move forward, especially in smaller businesses. So this is where we come with a demand-based, need-assessed approach. The Urban League itself, we use what we call a continual opportunity model. So we take everything from education, youth academics, technology, job readiness, mentoring, financial literacy, taking hard skills like national certifications, our Entrepreneurs Academy. We have a bank in which we actually use products that meet people where they are to help them not only be better stewards of their dollars, but also it helps them be better employees, right? Because if I'm not constantly worried about how I'm going to pay the rent, if I have to go here to court to handle an eviction, whatever it is, I'm not working. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Setting up partnerships with folks like CPCC, organizations like CPCC, UNC Charlotte, others, for continuing education, employment and entrepreneurship. And as a matter of fact, our workforce programs right now have a 73% placement rate for those who complete. Dignity for us, earned income, living wage income, and we want people to be bankable. And we want them to be bankable. There are a lot of other things that play into this. Health sector, others. This is our part, and we partner with them to deal with those other issues as they come. So our workforce priorities, let's give you an example on the ground for us, what we do. We're construction, broadband, energy, support services, and technology. We provide 5 national certifications. Let me just get to that quickly. Premise cabling and fiber technicians. As I told you, we're the largest provider of nationally certified fiber technicians to the FOA. Microsoft specialist. Customer service, we actually provide a certification in international customer service. Cast energy, so the construction and skills trade exam, we actually prep people and then actually get them into utility jobs, particularly in energy and telecommunications. What's great about that, many of those individuals just have a high school diploma, they get the certification, they're making over 50 a year when we place them. All right? Highway construction, HVAC. Now, here's something that I want you to know about these certifications that we provide. We are very strategic in how we actually select them. We select certifications, number one, that we know are short-term enough that these individuals who actually, right, are living on the cusp, need income quickly, that we have programs short enough that they can tolerate to get them into the industry. That's one. 2, the other thing is that they have cross-sector appeal. So for example, that broadband fiber optics, over 50% of our placements were not in the telecommunications industry, but they were in solar. They were in solar and in energy. Smart grid technology, fiber's conducting it. Solar panels out there, fiber's conducting it. And what we found is that with the solar companies, when we were placing people out there in some of these large projects, is that they said, yes, we can teach people how to place a panel, but you have to be certified to splice that fiber. So we'll take your folks. We'll teach them how to do the panels, but we can't teach them how to splice. Same thing with smart grid technology. HVAC. Again, over 50% of our placements in HVAC are not directly in HVAC. 50% of them are, but the other 50% are also in energy, and they're in maintenance. So they're not always, we look at things that have cross-sector appeal so that individuals can take advantage of that. Highway construction. We are now the Department of Transportation's lead agency for this region for highway construction training. In that sector alone, there are 75 different jobs, both on the labor and professional side. What's even great about this, our first cohort is 47% women in an industry that's less than 5% women. So this is about being intentional as well. So we have what we call Women in Blue Initiative, and we went aggressively after women, talking to them about the potentials of this industry. Some other things that we do for youth is also provide technology training and math. We're in 6 schools from 3rd to 8th grade, but we also provide national certifications, the same ones that adults get, to high school students before they graduate. So the focus is there, develop a workforce very early on, expose them, right? So you've heard right? The mother of invention is what drives it? Necessity, right? Well, exposure leads to innovation. So in that case, I tell people that the father of innovation is exposure. People have to be exposed. This exposes them. What's interesting about this is that mass majority, close to 68% of these young people going through those programs actually go on to higher education. And then the others go directly in the workforce. So just being exposed to the technology, actually obtaining a skill, getting a hard skill, a young person in high school, if I'm in 12th grade and I'm walking around and I have behind my name, certified premise cabler, fiber technician, that does something else for me. Changes my mentality. It also gives them exposure. Those who are in our Cisco, for example, that actually has a little bit over 80% going on to computer technology in college. So we really see that exposure early on creates these pathways. Just some other stats to briefly go over, and then we'll have about 15 for some question and answers. With our youth and young adults, we have 91% grade gains for all youth programs. At Rivergate and Sterling Elementary, two elementary schools we had a 40 to 60% increase in end-of-grade testing. 80% pass rate on national certification exams. Those are the same ones that adults get. 90% grade gains for what we call high school equivalency students in our partnership with CPCC. 71% secondary education first year for certification students. So if you are a certification student, that's actually up 71% this year. Got last year 68%. And 41 established mentor relationships. For adults, 95% pass rate on national exams. 73% placement rate within 6 months. 84% retention rate. Over 1,400 placed in fiscal year 15. Income increases 3 times, and collectively, that group earned $34.21 million in salaries. What's important about that for us is that we invested over a little over $800,000 into that program. That means for every dollar that we invested, $41 plus went back out to the community through their salary earnings. That has an effect on economy. It has an effect even on the ability to be employed and work because they're earning at a higher salary. So for many of us, this average salary of $13 is not life-changing, but for these folks it is. Because the average person coming into these programs are making less than $10,000 a year. Just quickly, give you some examples of inclusion for us. So if you look at the Urban League, our placement rate for HVAC is at 79%. Industry, when you're coming out, is a little bit below 50%. Women enrollment is at 10%, below 5% for the industry. Class retention at 92%, 65% for the industry. Job retention 91%, 70% for the industry. And job advancement 65% compared to 30%. This is just an example of what we call a continuum of opportunity, a community-wide one. So if we were to take those sectors of education with some emphasis, for example, on mixed income housing with additional focus on ownership, reading on grade level by 3rd grade, which actually predicts the ability for a person to pass, demand-based workforce for economics, and you see some of the others, health, social justice, and cultural, so STEAM focus, so not just science, technology, engineering, math, but also the arts, being part of that to help with the creativity, particularly on the entrepreneurial side. So we believe that by combining and having connectivity between these sectors, between these systems, we create greater employees for customers. Questions? Yes.
I'm in construction, and we have a bad turnaround rate with our drug testing. So we get qualified people, but then they fail the drug test. Do you guys address that?
We do, and it,
Sometimes I think they don't even realize that that's gonna be a requirement of employment.
well, I'm going to tell you, where we address it is very upfront in the recruitment stage. So when people come to us, we go through interviews just like they're going for a job. So we don't do drug tests, we do criminal background check, but we thoroughly go over this notion of drug testing. Because obviously when we're placing people, we're also on the line just like you.
We want them to stay.
Right, you want to stay.
And they might make the initial and then we're gonna do random.
Here's one of the biggest things that's affecting us right now. And it's something that we're going to have to find a solution to, particularly as I look at the younger millennial generations and those coming right behind them. 50% of our population today across the board believes that it's okay to use marijuana. That's a cultural thing. Very difficult to deal with. When our employers, unless they're part of a marijuana farm, are not going to be agreeing with that.
I come in because I was in the military. I served 23 years in the Air Force. And a lot of people do not realize you smoke one joint, they're going to stay in your system for 30 days.
Yep.
30 days. This is one joint.
And in your hair for longer.
The hair for long. I think it's kind of up to 6 months it could be.
Well,
Any other-
they're gonna legalize it, they're gonna
Well,
knock out that
good
problem.
luck. Even if they legalize it, doesn't mean the employer is going to go along with
Right,
it.
the employers
Right,
can
you,
still say.
you can't have someone operating heavy equipment out there, for example, right? A roller operating and behind me.
We drug test every aspect, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I manage projects for the power company, the telecommunications department, and a lot of the things you mentioned with solar, smart grid, fiber, all types of fiber work at substations, all that, I'm involved with that. So how would I get involved with your organization, or how do I volunteer?
My card, I'm going to leave here. You can contact me directly, and I'll link you with our program people. What's great about this is that we have industry support too. So Duke Energy, for example, funds the cast for us, right? Department of Transportation funds the Highway Construction Academy. And that first cohort, when I said 47% women, that first cohort also had 100% placement. Why? Because managing our project happened to also be the person managing our project also happened to be the compliance officer with the contractors, right? So it makes a difference, right? Relationships and how we manage, right? These relationships and manage the people. But what's very important is that those entities, like a Duke Energy, like a Department of Transportation, and I'm going to tell you what's very interesting about that, is that we also got other private companies to invest in those people. So Bank of America, Wells Fargo doesn't do construction, but they invested anyway. Right? Because for them, what does that mean? That means more people can own homes, right? Checking accounts, etc. So this is what I'm talking about when we talk about a systems change. That a lot of these people really can help in our system change. $34 million in salaries for 1,400 people, that's a decent amount of money invested in the economy. So if you start to multiply that across some of our partners and other sectors, it actually makes a big difference. But more important, it helps create easier circumstances for you as you manage projects and people. Because you'll be assured that many of them will come in with the soft skills in addition to the hard skills needed. So I'm going to say one quick thing about soft skills. The workforce partners, we talk about systems change, we all have developed what we call a work smart curriculum. This is also now going to be in the community college system. And it started with us, in which we have a universal shared life skills and soft skills curriculum between us. That people have to go through modules and be certified, pass exams, before we actually get them into placement activities after our training. And so one of the advantages of that, too, is that Those retention rates we showed you are actually monitored by real people. So as an employer, we're literally staying in touch with that individual up to a year.
We know that the number one missing skill in today's workforce, I hear it over and over from recruiters, is the ability to communicate with C-suite individuals in the morning in the boardroom and be on the factory floor with your teams running them in the afternoon. PMI recognized that the last version changed when they added stakeholder management as a knowledge area. So yes, as you said, community colleges are using it. It's hugely important. So we teach to that as well. It's incorporated into our project manager program. So we'd like to thank you for being here today.